Hello everyone, this is Sato from Satopin. Thank you for being here with me today. Today I am filming my first January wrap-up, what I've read in January. I don't usually film wrap-ups, but this month I wanted to film my first wrap-up because I read so many good books. In total, I have read 7 books, and that's crazy to me because I don't usually read that much. Unfortunately, I did have to DNF 2 books because it just wasn't the right time for me to read it. But yes, I wanted to talk about these books because all 7 books had 4 or 5-star ratings for me on Goodreads, and yeah. So I'm going to share them in the order that I read them. The first book I read in 2021 was The Midnight Library by Haig. This book is about, I'm looking in my book journal, Nora Seed. This book is about Nora Seed, who's in her mid-30s and she's stuck in her small hometown, and she has questions about her life. She has doubts. For example, if she continued her swimming lessons that she used to do as a kid, would she have been in the Olympics by now? Or if she stayed with that guy, would she be happily married now? So all these questions she has in her head, and all these regrets that she has, and one day she decides that she kind of just wants to give up on life, and that's how she ends up in this midnight library. And in the midnight library there are thousands of books, and each book has a possible different life that she could have had if she made different decisions in her life. So yeah, this book was really interesting. It's things that I think we all can relate to, like we think about things that could have gone different in our life. So yeah, this book explores that in a fun, not a fun way, but just like in a interesting and magical way. I gave this book 4 stars out of 5. Okay, and the next book I read was Homebody by Rupi Kaur, and I really like this poet. She is I believe Canadian. She's an amazing poet. She has 2 other books, and I also own them as well. I annotate these books, put post-its everywhere. It's just really relatable to me, but she manages to express these feelings in beautiful words. She's just amazing. And in between these, in the poem, she has these beautiful illustrations that she illustrates them herself, which is pretty awesome. So one of the poem that really stuck with me was this one I'm going to share with you. I'm not a victim of my life. What I went through pulled a warrior out of me, and it is my greatest honor to be her. Yeah, so this one you could read in one sitting. It's just a quick read, but it's also so beautiful and so powerful. I highly recommend this. Of course, I gave it 5 stars. And then the next book I read is a book that's talked about by everybody, I feel like, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This one took me a while to read because I started it back in December, and so basically a whole month for me to finish it. I felt like it wasn't boring, but the first half was really slow for me. But then it picked up from the middle, and then I couldn't put it down. So this book is about a girl who is, what's her name? See, this is why I need a book journal, because I can never remember the character's name. Addie LaRue. So Addie. Duh! This book is about Addie, who was born in the 1700s in France. And back then, you know, people were forced into marriages, and she really didn't want that. She wanted a life of freedom and be able to choose who she marries. So one night, in desperation, she calls out to the night, and a lot of people are calling this night spirit thing devil. I'm not quite sure what he is, but she makes a deal with him, and she promises him her soul if he could give her a life of freedom. And so what ends up happening is she never dies. So she lives for 300 years just roaming around. But there is a twist to the deal. She was cursed during this deal. So the curse is that whenever someone meets her, the moment they turn their back on her or they walk away, they will instantly forget her. So she just spends her life just roaming around without any friends, without any real connections, so she feels really lonely. So yeah, the book goes back and forth between the past in France in the 1700s to the present in 2014 in New York. When I first initially read this, and near the end I did cry, it made me very emotional. I gave it 5 stars, but after a few days of thinking about it, I think I have to agree with a lot of people's feelings or reviews that it wasn't perfect like I initially thought, because the fact is she lived for 300 years, and she kind of sometimes lightly mentions like, oh, I remember when this thing was invented and I met that guy and I met that famous guy, but we never get like details about those adventures that she had. I think at one point she was in the war too or something, so I wish like the author explored that more, like more historical events. That would have been really cool. So I did drop down my rating to 4 stars, but it's still an amazing read and I think I would recommend it to anyone. Alright, my 4th book of the year was Through the Woods. This one I borrowed it from the library. It's by Emily Carroll. This one is a graphic novel with 5 spooky stories that's illustrated, and it's I don't know, I went into it thinking I wasn't expecting much, but each story was so spooky and it was also beautifully illustrated. The colors are very vibrant, and I love that the story doesn't drag on. It like gets straight to the spooky part. Like some of the short stories were spooky right from the start. So yeah, this was a delightful read and I finished it in one sitting. My favorites were His Face is All Red. This one's about a younger brother who is jealous of his older brother. And right away they tell you that the younger brother kills his older brother. But the weird thing is his older brother is alive and he's like standing right in front of him. So that's how the story starts and it's really creepy. Another favorite of mine was The Nesting Place. This one is about a girl who visits her brother who like married and was like living away from home, and his fiance is like really mysterious. So that's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, those 2 were my favorite. Loved it. I kind of want it in my bookshelf now, so maybe in the future I'll buy it for myself. The 5th book I read, this was an audiobook. I listened to Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Oh my gosh, this book, I highly recommend listening to it on the audiobook because the narrator is so good. So it's a 10-hour audiobook, but I put it up to like 1.5, 1.8 speed. This one is about a girl who is like a perfect A student, you know, loved by everybody, loved by her mom. She's like the favorite child of the household. But one day she just disappears and everyone thinks that she ran away from home, but the mom is like, I know my girl wouldn't do that. She wouldn't run away from home without telling me. Something must have happened to her. But years go by and the police stop searching for her. Years later, the mom slowly starts figuring out what happened to her daughter on her own, and it's just, the mystery just unravels itself in such a thrilling way, and it's really fast-paced. And you get different points of view, so like the mom's point of view and the daughter's point of view, and there's like a couple other characters that I don't want to talk about because it'll be a spoiler, but it was so good and I highly recommend it. This one I gave it 5 stars. It's so good. Next book I borrowed from the library, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I finally read this book. I remember last year everybody was talking about it, probably during Halloween, because it is another spooky book. I think it was more of like a thriller more than a horror book, but yeah, I've been wanting to read this book, so I finally borrowed it from the library and I could not put it down. Now I understand why everyone's like raving about this book. I went into it not knowing much about it, so I think it really helped me get more spooked out in the spooky scenes, and then it made me love it even more. So I'm not going to give away too much about this book either. So basically there is a family and this family moves into this house, even though they knew about its dark past. What happens is they only stay in this house for 13 days. I believe it was 13. Let's see. No, 20 days, sorry. They stay in this house for 20 days because they are claiming that this house is haunted and they've run away. and the dad decides to write a book based on what happened in that haunted house. And the daughter years later is trying to figure out what really happened, because she doesn't even remember what happened in the house. She doesn't remember all the stuff that her dad wrote about in this book. So yeah, that's what the book is about. Very spooky in some parts. I was reading it like at night when I was home alone in bed, and I got goosebumps. It was so spooky. And then there were like thrillers, mystery. It was like a mix of all kinds of stuff that I love. So definitely loved it. It was a good pacing for me. It wasn't too slow, it wasn't too fast, and I had no idea what was going on until the very end. So it was awesome. I gave this book 5 stars. 2 more books. So another graphic novel I read this month was The Best We Could Do by Thi Bui. This one is a graphic memoir, which you don't get often, I think. So the author is looking back on her family's past. They were in Vietnam while the war was happening, and they had a really rough life in Vietnam. And then they also had to become refugees. They were trying to escape. They escaped to Malaysia, I believe, and they had to stay in refugee camps. And then they finally immigrated to America. So yeah, the author is trying to I think she spent years researching about her family's past and the war in her own country. And she's kind of just trying to piece them together into this beautiful memoir. The illustrations are very bold. And she only uses red for colors and black ink. It's very bold colors. I read this really slowly because I really wanted to make sure I don't know how to put it into words. Not enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's a book that you would enjoy, because it's very dark and hard-hitting at times, heavily historical based, and I did like that it does teach you about the war and Vietnam. She even has a graphic info on the war and the timeline, what happened. So yeah, it was very informational, and I think I wanted to just make sure I understood everything that was going on. So I took this slowly, but I'm glad I read this finally. I gave this book 5 stars out of 5. Then the last book I finally finished, I read this on my Kindle, so let me just take out the cover. I finally read The E-Arc of Actor Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbbert. I mean, what can we say at this point? We all love her. We all love the Brown sisters. So I was fortunate enough to get an arc for this, and I was so excited. I think I kept putting it off because I just didn't want it to end. I didn't want the Brown sisters to end, but I did finally finish it. This book will be published on March 9th. So yeah, pretty soon. I think I loved Eve Brown as much as Danny Brown. Chloe's kind of my middle. Danny Brown I loved, and Eve I think is a close second or first even. This one follows the youngest sister of the Brown sisters, and she kind of feels like she fails at everything. She looks up to her older sisters, Danny and Chloe, and she's always like, oh, they know what they're doing in life, but I don't. She tries many things. She goes to university, but she fails on the courses. She tries doing wedding planning, but she fails at it. So she just doesn't know what she wants in life. One day when her parents tell her that she doesn't have a safety net anymore because she was living at home with her parents, and they would give her money, and they're like, if you don't have a safety net anymore, you gotta go to get a job, move out of our house, get your life together. And so she's upset. She leaves her house, and then she randomly comes across this B&B where this man, he is Jacob Wayne, and he's the owner of the B&B, and he is holding an interview for a chef at the B&B. And Eve took some cooking classes, so she's like, yeah, I guess I'll do this interview. And yeah, she gets the job. And then from there her life kind of changes for the better. So yeah, I love their romance as well. I love that Jacob Wayne, he has autism, and he's just socially awkward. He doesn't know the social rules, and I love that it made it they were always fighting and bickering, but that made it more fun and interesting. So yeah, definitely guys, this is worth it. Of course, I hope you get to read it when it comes out on March 9th. Okay, yeah, those were all the books I read in January. 7 books. That's amazing. I'm very impressed with myself. I don't know if I can keep it up in February, but we'll see. So yeah, like I said, all great books, 4 or 5-star reads. I highly recommend all of them. So I hope you had a good reading month as well, and I'll see you next time. Bye!